It's a Security Weekly News, and it's episode, a really nice, round, non-prime number, 260. Wow. I'm Doug White, and it is the week of 4 December 2022. We've got Where Baby Chips Come From, PhilTel, AMI, Proot, Magecart, Lockbit, Scattered Spider, Jason Wood, and more on the Security Weekly News.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
It's the show that keeps you up to date on the latest security news twice a week, your trusted source for accurate security information and expert analysis. It's time for Security Weekly News.
We know that many of you are looking to bolster your security posture with cloud-native app protection and XDR. So if you haven't heard of Upticks, put them on your radar. They offer both cloud and endpoint security in a single solution. Listeners can use Upticks for up to 1,000 assets for a full year for only $1. But hurry, this offer is available only through December 31st at securityweekly.com/Upticks. That's UPTYCS, Upticks. How is your business staying one step ahead of cybercriminals? Secure your email applications, network, and data with Barracuda. Protect your business and go from zero to security in no time flat. Whether your team is working in one location or many, Barracuda has solutions that are easy to buy, deploy, and use. Learn how Barracuda can protect your business against ransomware, phishing, and other cyber attacks. Visit securityweekly.com/Barracuda. That's securityweekly.com/Barracuda. Barracuda, your journey secured. All right, welcome to the Security Weekly News. So I saw this story, and I kind of wanted to shout out to PhilTel. PhilTel is a volunteer organization that launched last June, and they're planning to put up free-to-use payphones in Philadelphia. And their very first phone is going up on the 17th of December at Iffy Books. So Iffy Books is sort of a, I don't know if it's famous, but it's like a known hacker bookshop that's been around for a while. So Mike Dank is one of the founders of this, and Mike said that the project was inspired by a person in Oregon who installed a payphone in their front yard, like a free payphone, and the project was called Project PhilTel, and I don't know what that means, or maybe it's FUTEL. I'm not sure. We won't go there, but they had resulted in ending up putting up more and more payphones around Portland, Oregon. So apparently there's only about 50 actual working payphones left in Philadelphia. And if you follow like Alt 2600 or something, you see that's a common thing people post on there about, here's a working payphone in Azerbaijan or something, and, actually has a dial tone. But Dank has said that not everybody can afford a cell phone, and that they maybe still need these things. And I know you do see people using them in airports and things occasionally. I put a link to PhilTel on the site as well with the article that was reporting on it. They are operating on donations, and I thought it was a project that a lot of you would probably be interested in. Maybe you want to start a project like that in your own town. It did not say how they were doing this. So it was, I don't know what they're doing exactly to put these phones up or make them work. So check it out. Eclipsium reported 3 vulnerabilities in American Megatrend's MegaRack baseboard management controller software, and are calling that collection of vulnerabilities BMC&C. So yeah, and you can see if you're watching on the video, you can see the graphic of a very old-looking manual. But this particular thing is a baseboard management controller, which is called a BMC, and it came from MegaRack, and it's a widely used baseboarding controller for a lot of different server manufacturers. And what those things do, if you've never supported like a rack server kind of environment, they typically provide the management backbone for your servers. So you plug all those baseboarding tools into a switch or a VLAN, and then that's your sort of server management network, and you can set up a jump host or something. So people, this is how you should do it, and so people can, your administrators can access that for, these things can control everything from like just monitoring to fans to all kinds of different stuff depending on the kind of the server brand. If you've ever had a rack server, you probably had some kind of baseboard management tool on board that. Some of the brands listed that use this particular thing are AMD, Ampere, ASRock, Dell, Gigabyte, HP, Huawei, Lenovo, NVIDIA, Qualcomm, and there was a whole long list of different server manufacturers that actually use this particular. I don't know if it's an API or it's more like maybe a chipset. Well, whatever it is, but they all those use the AMI BMC. The three vulnerabilities are an arbitrary code execution via Redfish API, default credentials to UID 0, with a shell via SSH, and user enumeration via API. So three vulnerabilities that when combined actually create a pretty nasty opportunity that would allow remote control of the compromised server, remote deployment of malware, remote deployment of ransomware, and firmware implants, which of course can then cause you not to be able to get rid of this even if you reboot. And then they actually had some test where they showed they could brick the server, and I mean brick it like permanently, by damaging the firmware. Since the BMC is out of band, it may still be connected to the admin or management network, but some people have accidentally connected these things to their actual production networks, which is never a good idea. But all of this adds up to a supply chain problem if these servers can be compromised on the fly. There are a pretty long list of mitigations in that article. So if you are using some of those servers and you have that baseboard management enabled, you may want to check into it. In a bring your own file system attack, hackers are apparently using this to attack the open source Linux Proot utility. I actually had a joke that was like, I am Proot, but I didn't think anybody would get it, and it sounds weird, so I dropped it. And then I ended up talking about it anyway, didn't I? But anyway, a BYOF attack is basically where you create a partition at home or wherever, in a bus station or wherever it is you like to do these sorts of things, and you basically put all your hacking tools or your compromise tools or your ransomware tools or whatever it is you're doing in that partition. And then you have to somehow get that partition copied onto a server or other device that's running Linux, and then you just mount it. And so then all those tools are available. So if you have enough permissions to actually mount a partition, and sometimes you do, you actually can embed a lot of tools there. And then that makes that a very big threat. So it's kind of like plugging in a drive, but a lot of times they won't allow you to plug in a drive, but if they would let you put a partition on there somehow, it's a big deal. So Sysdig was reporting on this, and they said that the findings indicated that most of the attacks that involved this with this particular group led to crypto mining, but that since they've compromised the system anyway, they may well either sell this or they themselves may expand into more harmful types of attack. So Proot, if you aren't familiar with it, is an open source utility that actually allows users to set up an isolated root file system. So this is the whole point of Proot. And it has chroot in it and mount and some other commands that are available in that particular tool. By default, of course, these things are confined into some kind of guest file system. But if they don't set it up correctly, you may be able to access other stuff on the system, including copying files and so forth. The attacks that Sysdig was talking about used Proot to deploy a malicious file system on an already compromised system, which included network scanning tools like Nmap and so forth, XMRig crypto miner, and other config files that they could then use to do things. Since Proot, of course, can access that host file system, it's possible to push all these tools onto the local drive partition or use this as a source point for scanning the network, scanning the environment, and so forth. Once they did all that, they unpacked these files into /tmp/Proot and then ran an XMRig crypto miner, which, kind of seems like a waste of all this, but, you be you. The mass scan tool was also on there, which may indicate they plan to rapidly expand this. The attack does require some sort of compromise prior to this, probably with social engineering or phishing, but there's a ton of details about this attack and how it works in the article. A new Magecart campaign has impacted at least 44 e-commerce sites. Jay Scrambler reported all those attacks. The attackers basically took over a defunct internet domain that had previously been hosting a JavaScript library that had been decommissioned in 2014. So this domain is just sitting out there. And then so what happened was companies running websites apparently still had components of this JavaScript in their platforms and had never bothered to remove it. It was just something that was laying there. And then, of course, once the domain came back live, it probably requested an update and said, oh, yeah, we have an update for you. Here you go. Apparently, this attack has been running since December 2021 and uses a loader script, which looks a lot like Google Analytics, or some of them look like Google Tag Manager, and both of those are pretty common things that people would be downloading. So, I mean, it's basically just a failure to manage your code and clean it up properly. And Jay Scrambler said, quote, "Most web apps are a complex mashup of elements leveraging code from the web supply chain, and most security teams don't have visibility into this third-party code running on their website. Poorly secured web apps. I find that hard to believe. But you, unlike these people who got slammed, need to add your web apps and your and all the APIs and stuff into your code base so that security scanning and security analysis can take effect even on third-party tools, so that you can clean this stuff up, or you're going to get got." It was very clever. I enjoyed the article, and I like the way that they did that with this old domain. Obviously, that's not something you can do easily. Well, easily if you can find a domain. Lockbit gang claimed attack on Thales, which is a defense company. I guess that's how you say it, or maybe I don't know if it's Thales or Tails or how you say it. And also on Continental, which is another large company in Germany. And as November ended with these attacks, it made November the second most ransomware-y month of the year. Black Fog said that 42 publicly disclosed ransomware attacks occurred in November, which marked a 180% increase over last year. So, wow. 86% of the attacks they found used PowerShell. Okay, I'm not shocked there. And 89% of the attacks exfiltrated data. So people moving on into that, double extortion model that's been so popular lately. The average payout of these attacks this was the ones that were reported, was over $258,000 US, which was a 13.2% increase over the second quarter of 2022. Hey, inflation's hitting everywhere, right? Ransoms are going up. What are we going to do? Healthcare and manufacturers was the biggest sector increases, with a 26 and 25% increase respectively over last year. Education attacks increased by 14%, and government attacks increased by 13%. 46% of these attacks were in the United States. So I've said it before, and I'll most likely say it over and over again. You probably should get your ducks in a row with your response plans, because it's very likely at some point you will get got. I mean, they have an infinite series of attempts, and eventually they'll come up with something that one of your people will fall for. So plan ahead. A group now named Scattered Spider. Who makes these names? And why won't they make me one? But anyway, Scattered Spider is targeting telcos and business process outsourcing companies with the goal of gaining access to mobile carrier networks, which sounds pretty ominous. Scattered Spider is a financially motivated attacker that's been around since last June. And CrowdStrike said that they essentially gain access, perform daily operations, and sustain their presence. And then they may start deploying VPNs or other remote monitoring and management tools in the victim's network. They then use that network as a base to move laterally to other companies in the same space. And they're obviously trying to use credentials and trust to get into those mobile networks. In this particular, what CrowdStrike was reporting, they use social engineering via phone calls, SMS, and Telegram messaging to pretend to be IT staff and get credentials entered on a phishing page. Now, you immediately go, yes, but we have MFA, so they can't get us. Well, guess what they did? They actually circumvented MFA by using social engineering, because and this is like the oldest stuff, from back when I was doing, the first pen test I ever did in like 1986. We were just convincing people to give us information over the phone, and they got the victims to give up the OTP while they were interacting with them via text or on the phone. And so be sure your people know never to give out their OTP token, even if the person calls and says, "This name is Dave Webb." Not that I ever used that name. Dave Webb, and they're from IT, and they're trying to detect a hacker in the network, and they think it might be you, and somebody's going to get fired. But if you could just give me your username, password, and your mother's maiden name, and your OTP, I can validate you, and we'll move you off the list of suspects. And, 7 people hung up on me, but that 8th person went, "Oh, my God, that's terrible. Let me get that information for you." Like, thank you so much, sir. And while we're at it, would you like to donate $500 to, I don't know, the Dave Webb College Fund? It's for a good cause. Yeah, we didn't do that, of course. CrowdStrike went on to say that, quote, the faster the organization implemented swift and bold security measures, the faster the adversary activity ceased. Yes, I would think so. They went on and said, these containment and mitigation measures focused on secure identity and MFA controls and configuration. So when people, basically reevaluated that, configured this stuff correctly, convinced people not to give out their OTPs, it stopped. Okay, makes sense. Accenture's Cyber Threat Intelligence Team Survey looked at the Infostealer malware landscape for 2022 and noted that a spike in the number of dark web advertisements for new Infostealer malware variants had increased a lot. The report indicated the demand for compromised credentials is growing based on looking at a Russian market site, which is used by Redline, Raccoon Stealer, Vidar, Taurus, and Azurult, all of which were looking to obtain credentials that were for sale. So just like the previous story, the ability to get around MFA using credentials and social engineering is very effective because it completely eliminates MFA as a component if the user will give that up. And if you have the username and the password for somebody, it's very possible that you can convince them to give you that OTP information as well, since they may not even understand what it is other than being a hassle. So, if you have those credentials, it's a real big problem. And you can use it, of course, for very effective spear phishing. But, who knows? The report goes on to talk about MFA fatigue attacks, which, of course, basically means I just bomb your MFA device with attempts. So it's constantly going, please approve, please approve, please approve, please approve, until you accidentally hit OK instead of no. Or you just get frustrated with it, go, yeah, okay, and and then they get in using your credentials. So a big problem. And of course, users may disable MFA if they're allowed to do that because of this kind of MFA fatigue. The report says that Infostealers will emerge as one of the top 3 most prevalent attacks by the end of next year. The article does have recommendations, and one of which is encouraging the use of MFA best practices per the CISA guidelines. So do the right thing. Well, his breakout role as a burping ghoul in Orgy of the Dead 2 was considered sublime, and a legendary nude scene in It Came From Within 4 locked him in as a horror legend. Please welcome Jason Wood.
Hey, everybody. Good to be back with you. So this one article actually caught my attention because it is basically, it was just so out of the norm. Basically, last month, just before the Thanksgiving holidays here in the U.S., Google won a lawsuit against Russian operators of the Glupteba botnet, and this was the interesting part, and against their U.S.-based attorney. Not that they sued the attorney, but that attorney pissed off the judge enough that the attorney got wrapped up in the damages or legal fees payment. Anyhow, this whole thing began like a year ago, December 2021. Google Threat Analysis Group began operations to disrupt the Glupteba botnet. Speaking of unusual names, and at the same time, the Google legal team decided to file a civil lawsuit against the operators of the botnet, which is a little bit unusual. But it basically kicked off an 11-month legal battle. Now, here, the interesting part is, of course, the operators of Glupteba were in Russia. So, you file a court case in the U.S. How is that going to work out? We'll see I'll get to that in a bit. But it was an interesting case. Glupteba itself is a rootkit that steals credentials, disables security tools, and is kind of a point of presence to try and compromise other hosts. It's been described as a downloader for other tools and things like that. It actually was first reported on back in 2011 by ESET. So this bit of malware has been around for quite a while, but now it's been wrapped up into a larger botnet campaign, and now it's being called the Glupteba botnet. To disrupt this particular campaign, really Google had all of the information that they needed, or the capability they needed to do so, because involved in that was 63 million Google Docs that were distributing the malware, 1,183 Google accounts, 908 cloud projects, and 870 Google Ads accounts were all discovered as being part of the distribution and operation of this botnet. So clearly, Glupteva had no problem using Google resources. The downside of that is when Google, discovered all this a year ago, they had everything they needed to tear them down. They had all the access, of course, to their own systems, and were able to just start tearing this down. The lawsuit, again, was filed at the same time, and this was kind of an effort to name and shame a bit the individuals who were responsible for it. And Google didn't go for punitive damages or anything like that. They just were after a cease and desist, to stop operations. Now, the lawsuit named, depending on where you read, in the Brian Krebs article that I linked, it named one individual and 15 John Does who they didn't have identities of. In another article I found, they actually named two different individuals, that resided in Russia, along with the John Does. But the goal again was to try and get them to put pressure on them to get them to stop operations. Now, Google notes that this is a bit unusual because there are some risks with starting the legal process, and that essentially the defendants can use the legal discovery phase of the lawsuit to try and gather more information about how Google is doing things and how are they disrupting us. And so that was some of their concerns, but they decided, no, the benefit of this and the potential to hopefully shut this thing down is there. So we're going to go ahead and do this. In spite of the risk that the group may have no interest in complying with any orders of the court anyway, and that's basically what ended up happening. The defendants retained a lawyer in the United States to defend themselves, and they were actively participating, in the back and forth in the lawsuit. They apparently worked for a Russian firm named Valtron, which Spelltrek wanted to change to Voltron all over the place, and that was where they had access to the botnet itself and all of their various work and tools and things like that, and insisted there was nothing that they were doing that was illegal. And then finally, in May, I believe it is, their lawyer reported to the court that, oh, my goodness, as now we're entering into the discovery phase, the employees, the defendants, have all been fired by Valtron, and now they no longer have access to company laptops or resources, and they don't have access to the botnet. So, oh my goodness, we can't give you any information that you're requesting because they no longer have jobs. There was a problem with that, though. Their lawyer, Igor Litvak, a New York-based defense attorney, told the court first that they had that access removed, and then later on in additional court dates after that point, he made some comments essentially saying that the defendants had access to the botnet still in some manner, and the judge pointed this out, and this is consistency, and was not very amused. Finally, Litvak just indicates that, hey, his clients want to settle, and Google's like, all right, let's go ahead and see if we can shut this thing, the settlement, do the settlement, shut this case down, and you guys stop doing your thing. So here was the offer from Litvak and his defendants, or his clients. The defendants were willing to give Google the private keys to Bitcoin addresses associated with the botnet, and they would give their promise that they would not engage in any future criminal activity. However, there's a loss of wages and stuff like that we have to deal with. What they needed in return from Google was the agreement: one, don't report us to law enforcement. We want to be able to take vacations in other countries. Two, Google need to pay each of the defendants, so 16 to 17 people, $1 million, and they had to pay $110,000 in legal fees, attorney fees, which would presumably go to Mr. Litvak. And then, that would be fair because supposedly these Bitcoin addresses or keys would be enough to help Google shut down the operations. Now, Google basically called BS on this and went ahead and reported them to law enforcement for trying to extort money out of them. the judge, Denise Coate, made the following statement in her opinion in the case, and this is the quote: "It is now clear that the defendants appeared in this court not to proceed in good faith to defend against Google's claims, but with the intent to abuse the court system and the discovery rules to reap profit from Google." End quote. So, Judge Coate basically found against the defendants, and found Litvak to be complicit in attempting to extort money from Google. And so as a result, he was also ordered, along with the defendants, to pay for Google's legal fees, which I would expect to be rather significant after a year of work by an entire corporate legal team and third-party counsel and things like that. Litvak obviously, is trying to now avoid this. He's filed a motion to reconsider the verdict with the court that found against him, and has said if that motion to reconsider is dismissed, then he will appeal to the Second Circuit Court of Appeals, and go from there, so he can get justice for this and this situation and his clients. I have no idea what the Second Court of Appeals is going to, or Second Circuit Court of Appeals is going to do. Are they going to be likely to overturn this or not? Or, it sounds like just all over the place. They never had any good faith in this, as you're reading some of the articles around this, which I imagine will just potentially increase the attorney fees that he needs to pay. I found the whole thing hilarious because, it's not going to mean anything to the guys, the folks in Russia who are dealing with this. We'll see how the law enforcement thing plays out, and does that limit any of their movements outside of Russia? Maybe. Litvak being based in the United States, well, he's much more exposed to the requirements to pay out his portion of these fees and stuff like that. So, in the end, I just read through the whole thing and thought, well, here's to hoping that he has to pay more legal fees, because this was just pretty doggone scummy all around. Fun read. Go ahead and check it out.
Thank you, Jason. I love it when criminals are like, I'll stop robbing you if you pay, like what I would have robbed you for in the first place with some other damages and things. And yeah, that Litvak guy's going to end up one of those guys with the billboards on 195 that say, would you like to use your workers' comp to pay for your DUI settlement? Kind of attorneys, yeah, maybe. Or not. He'll be a big shot. Who knows? All right. Thanks, Jason. And finally, a woman trying to enter mainland China from Macau. And Macau is that sort of James Bond part of China. It's like an island where they have casinos and stuff. So it's a different sort of place. But she was trying to cross from Macau into mainland China. And she appeared to be pregnant and was trying to go through customs at Gongpei, and apparently had hundreds of Intel processors and iPhones in some kind of fake baby bump prosthetic, which I thought was funny. Everybody's thought about that, right? How many times did you go to a concert and think, how many Fireball nips could I get into the concert if I had a, yeah. Now, I know that being arrested by Chinese police while pretending to be a pregnant woman is on my bucket list, and it may be on yours, but it's probably not a good idea. It's kind of like hitting a golf ball into the Grand Canyon, which also is a bad idea, and was like somebody got arrested for that this week. But anyway, the customs person, as they do, asked, how many months pregnant are you? And the woman said 5 or 6. And apparently the customs person was very astute and felt like this pregnancy looked a little further along than that. And the next thing you know, you're in Chinese prison. Now, apparently this was not a new thing in Chinese customs history. Probably not any customs history. Considering, but the weird thing to me was that most of this stuff was probably made in China in the first place. There were iPhones and Intel chips. So weren't they made in... but it's quite ironic. Anyway, that's the news. Thanks, Jason, and I will see you on Friday.